Om Shanti and a warm welcome to all of you. Hope all of you are doing well today. The ability to achieve forgiveness and let go of the past hurts is one of the most critical challenges many of us face on the road of attaining personal peace and happiness. While it certainly isn't easy, it is absolutely necessary for long-term mental and emotional health. Joining us today, Brother Charlie, who all of you are very known to, but I will still give a little introduction. Brother Charlie is the executive of Brahma Kumaris Australia and the chairman of board of directors. He is also an active member of the Brahma Kumaris International Coordinating Group, responsible for major projects and the direction of the organization. He travels regularly throughout the world to speak at conferences, seminars, retreats, and workshops. He has been a meditator for over 45 years. So let us all welcome Brother Charlie today. Good evening. We cannot hear you, brother. No, there's no volume.
Can you hear me now? Is that
Yes.
okay?
Yes, that's good.
Okay. Thank you so much, Ben. It's really lovely to be with you all. And thank you for having me. And I always just love to ask everyone, I hope you're all okay. Hope everyone is traveling okay. We're living in an extremely challenging world and each one of us is having to face a lot at the moment. And I think I'm hearing from so many that people are really, really valuing their spiritual practice. I feel that this is the time not just to know, not just to have a faith in something, but to really practice. And we get so much support from that. And my spiritual practice supports all my family and those around me. In our spiritual journey, so many things come up, but many of us have things of the past that hang in my heart and in my mind. And sometimes in my quiet moments, a lot of feelings bubble up, regrets. And I would say that forgiveness is one of the greatest acts of human character. In my experience, forgiveness can change some of the most negative experiences and situations into some of the most positive. Forgiveness is able to change a stalemate of egos when egos are just clashing with each other. Forgiveness can change that stalemate into something of reconciliation and a movement forward in life. Forgiveness can release long-held pain. Sometimes we hold this pain so deeply inside, and forgiveness is like a release valve that makes me feel so light and frees me from this self-imposed prison of pain I've put myself in. Forgiveness allows love to flow again. Forgiveness is really such an act of courage and humility. And yet look at our world at the moment. I'm not sure how you are seeing the world. There's so many lenses I can look through, but one of the lenses that I see is that we all carry the weight of our history, whether it's my personal history or my collective history. And sometimes past events, hurts, pain, anger are like a big shadow. It's like a huge shadow over me, over my family. And it seems that we just can't step out of that shadow. And it's like my ego holds on to things that have happened, things people have done, things that people have said, and my ego will not let go of them. How can I free myself from the pain of the past? How can I really move forward? I would say forgiveness is one of the most powerful methods to free myself and have that sweet feeling of lightness and a conscience that's light and clear inside. And it's amazing how sometimes we identify with the past, not only my personal past, but even our collective past. In the sense that I remember one of the Brahma Kumari's older sisters, she was invited by the Pope to Assisi some years ago. And often at Assisi, if you know, in Italy, a beautiful part of Italy, he invites the leaders of different faiths for dialogue. And she was saying that they had a beautiful, beautiful meeting for a few days. And hearts came close. And then on the last morning, one of them was speaking about some interaction with another faith tradition 300 or 400 years ago. And it touched another person from another faith tradition. And that person stood up and said, well, that happened 300 or 400 years ago. Your people did this to us 600 years ago. And she said it was almost like they were arguing about things that had happened so long ago. And it seems that a great part of our spiritual journey is to learn how to come so close to God that I have the power to let go those memories and those feelings that are like a shadow constantly holding me back, holding me down, and filling my heart with sadness and pain from the past. And I remember I was in South Africa when Nelson Mandela became the president. It was actually by chance because I'd been invited to that country 6 or 8 months before, and I just happened to land a few days after he was made the president. And it was an extraordinary time. And it was like the whole country was having a party. There was a sense of freedom. And during that time, I went to a retreat with the BK community in the Orange Free State. If any of you know that part, it's a wheat belt of South Africa. And when we arrived to this property, it was a large farm. The owner, who was a big white South Afrikaner, he greeted us and showed us around in a very sweet way. And when he came to his house, he had these big turrets on each corner of his house. And I asked him, what are they? And he said they were gun turrets. We imagined that when Nelson Mandela came to power, that then all the Africans would come and take back their land. And he said, this land has been with my family for many, many generations. And then I asked him, why didn't it happen? And he thought for a while, and then he said, Nelson Mandela. And he said, because Nelson Mandela always said he didn't agree with apartheid, which is this division of people based on color. He didn't agree with that at all. But he never hated the individuals. In fact, he forgave the individuals. And in one sense, one man's power to really forgive, the individuals modeled it for a whole country. And many had felt there'd be huge bloodshed at that time, but because of one man's act of greatness to really forgive the individuals, he never said what happened with apartheid was right, but he never blamed the individuals. It, in a sense, gave everyone the opportunity to forgive and move on to a certain extent. And I do feel that, how do you feel when you forgive? How do you feel? all of us have been wronged. All of us have been accused of wrongdoing. All of us have been the brunt of blame and things like this. And we all know that this is a part of life. But how do you feel when you forgive? In my experience, you feel so light, you feel so good, you know it's right, you know it's the truth. And you feel comfortable when you can forgive and let go. And I feel it's just such a methodology of freeing myself. And I remember one person I met in Melbourne, actually. He was originally from Europe, grew up in Europe. And he came to Australia as an immigrant and had lived for a long time. And after 25 years, he went back to his home country. And when he was telling me about it, he was so happy, telling me what he did. And he said, I have a huge regret, huge regret. And I said, what is that? And he said, for many years, I held many bad feelings in my heart about my childhood there, many bad memories. And when I went back, I just let them go. I forgave and I moved on. He said, I have a huge regret that I didn't do it 25 years ago, because he said, I've carried this heaviness in myself for such a long time. And he said, it's just burned me inside. But now I've moved on, I've forgiven, I've freed myself. And I sometimes think that, when you forgive, you feel so light, you feel so free. And to me, it aligns with truth. It's like, it feels right. Your self-respect grows. We have to sometimes forgive and move forward. But if we can't forgive, how do you feel? We feel consumed by anger, resentment, hurt, and blame. And it's like a fire of resentment that burns inside. I think all of us know how uncomfortable and bad that feeling can be. And yet it's very hard to let go of sometimes. And the trap is, I feel justified. In my own head, I justify. But who is suffering? It's me. I put myself in a jail of my own ego in one sense and keep punishing myself day in and day out with these negative thoughts and feelings about someone or something that has happened. And yet I'm the one who suffers. And this is why forgiveness is so much a part of the spiritual journey. And to me, forgiveness is canceling all the conditions in my mind that stop me being loving and happy. Because when I can't forgive, I suppress my love. I suppress my happiness. I push it down. And it's like when I cancel those conditions, I can step back into the feelings of love and happiness. Forgiveness is like a decision. I don't want to punish myself anymore. It's like a decision that I'm going to let go this this self-punishment and blame and all those feelings because I want peace. And forgiveness is like a decision that I'm really going to free myself from my past and really step into a place of peace once again. And I think that when we have the courage to really do this, then we really begin to free myself internally. And I once heard a story about a man in an African country, and he had married into the president's family of this country. And he described how he lived like an absolute prince. He lived, he said, like an emperor. And there was a coup, and his father-in-law, who was the president, was jailed, and he was jailed. And he described how for 6 years he lived in a prison cell with cockroaches and rats. There was no sanitation. And he became so sick. And he said, I went from a life of absolute luxury to a life that could not have been worse. But in jail, he said, the only thing I had was God. I really strengthened my relationship with God. And in this country, there was yet another coup, and he was released and he lived overseas. He went overseas. And many years later, he came in front of the person who jailed him, the person who put him in a jail cell for 6 years with just rats and cockroaches and no sanitation. And he said to him, I forgive you. I forgive you. Because he said that his relationship with God became so strong, he had the power to let this go. And the man who was the president, whom he forgave, went away. And the next day he said he came back with tears in his eyes and said, I treated you worse than an animal, and yet you've still forgiven me. He said, you've changed my life. You've changed my life. We can't underestimate the power to forgive. The power to forgive is an incredibly strong spiritual force, not only to transform me, but even transform those around me. And I would say it's a great part of this spiritual journey, a huge part of our spiritual practice. Even Christ on the cross, what did he say? Oh Lord, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Even as he was dying, he had this act of forgiveness, this act of compassion. And I noticed for myself that, what I love about spirituality is that you reflect on yourself rather than looking at others all the time, what they're doing, what they should be doing, what they're not doing. You begin to take more responsibility for the self, and you observe what makes you happy and what makes you unhappy. And how do I measure my spirituality? For me, it's a lot about how I treat other people. My attitude to people, I think, is a practical measure of how much spirituality I have. And I notice that when I see good in people, when I have compassion for people, when I show respect for people, when I can forgive others, I feel comfortable about myself. If I'm negative about others, if I'm critical about others, I don't feel very comfortable inside when I can't forgive. And I would say, if you reflect on your life, if you've made a mistake, if you've done something against your truth, if you've betrayed someone you love dearly and they forgive you, how do you feel? Is there a greater gift? I don't think there can be a greater gift. You feel so heavy inside, you feel so bad, and yet someone says, okay, I'm going to help, I'm going to forgive you and move on. But it's easy to say these things, I know. And I have a lot of questions actually about forgiveness. And one of them is it easy to forgive? Is it easy to forgive? Because I think a lot of the block of many of us is that we think, okay, I want to free myself from this pain and hurt. But if I forgive, is it like saying what you did was okay when I really don't feel it's right? It's against my values. It's against my truth. I absolutely feel it's possible to say, I'm going to forgive because I want a life of peace. I want a life of harmony and happiness. But I think it's possible to say, I didn't agree with what's happened. It's not my values, but for my peace, I'm going to move forward. Once I was running a workshop here in Australia, and we were talking about the law of karma. It's a fascinating law. And one woman put up her hand and she became quite emotional. And I think we were touching on this whole thing of clearing accounts, forgiving, moving forward in life. And she said, how can I forgive? I was abused as a child. How can I forgive? And when someone says that, when someone's had such a huge thing happen to them, quite frankly, I didn't know what to answer. I just felt any answer is a bit superficial, a bit trite. So it was totally silent for a minute, just completely silent. And then another woman spoke and she said the same thing happened to me. I was burning inside, but I decided to release myself and free myself to forgive. But I did say to the person, peacefully even, It wasn't right what happened. I don't agree with it. And yet for my peace, I'm going to forgive and move forward. And it was amazing how that second woman's words just really helped support the first woman. So sometimes I think, well, is it easy to forgive? Because sometimes we feel we're just saying, well, what you did is okay, when it's not actually okay. Secondly, I think, are there limits to forgiveness? Should we always forgive? And I remember reading once about a man called Simon Wiesenthal, and he was actually jailed by the Nazis. He was Jewish in the Second World War. And he was one of the leaders in the camp, leaders of the Jewish community. And one day he was summoned to the bedside of a dying Nazi. And this Nazi wanted to confess to a Jew all the bad things he'd done to the Jewish people. He wanted to sort of free himself of the burden he was carrying of his own actions. And so Simon was summoned and sat beside this man's bed just before he passed away. And Simon said that he listened and listened, but he remained silent. He didn't say a word. He didn't console him or comfort him. And later he was feeling, should have I really done that? He just didn't know really, what were the limits of forgiveness of what this person had done to my community. How far should I go? Or even sometimes there's the question, is my forgiveness selective? And I find this really interesting because have you ever noticed you can forgive one member of your family, they may be rude and behave badly, and just you laugh it off, it's nothing. Another member, maybe it's the same sort of behavior, and each time they behave in that way, I can't let it go. I react quite strongly. I don't like it. I can't forgive them. And so it sort of indicates that sometimes with different people, we have different past accounts. Some we seem to be able to let go very easily. Some it's really not so easy. And I think that, at sometimes we really come under the influence of a lot of compassion. And I feel during this time of COVID, I think there's a lot of compassion for the other. There's so much suffering in our world at the moment. And I remember one person telling me she was running the BK Center in Turkey, in Istanbul. And you may remember 20 years ago, there was a massive earthquake. And I think 30,000 died in that earthquake. And she was telling me that they were not allowed out of their homes if their homes weren't damaged. And after 1 week, she went down to the water. If you've been to Istanbul, you know what a beautiful city it is on the water. And it's a popular pastime to walk around the water. And she just got there. And as she got there, there was a car crash. 2 men crashed in their cars. And she said, usually they're so hot-tempered, they'd get out and yell and scream and fight. But she said it was an amazing scene. These 2 men hopped out of their cars, went up to each other and hugged each other. And she said, just because we were in this time of trouble, everyone was carrying the weight of what had happened, that they showed so much compassion and forgiveness for each other, and sometimes what I feel is that sits below the surface. This capacity sits below the surface. And when it really is needed, we have this incredible capacity to have compassion and forgive each other when we need to. And can some even say forgive and forget? Do you think it's possible? I don't really think that's totally possible. I think we can forgive, but the memory will stay there. But I think when we forgive and let go, the pain of the memory is reduced. The memory remains, but maybe the pain or hurt associated with the memory can go. Even I sometimes wonder that if there's been a falling out with somebody and we can't really meet them, how do you clear that? How do you really move on from that problem? forgive and forget. And I forgive them at least. And I have a friend in Melbourne, and he was telling me that he had had a falling out with one of his friends, and they hadn't spoken for years. And he began to really meditate a lot and practice spirituality. And you know, when you get to a point in your life where you want to clear up a lot of things, you want to resolve a lot of things in your life. And so he really wanted to clear this with his friend. And so he would ring him, and as you know, on digital phones, they can see your name, and his friend wouldn't answer the phone. And so he really reflected on it, and he even asked a third party, another friend, to ring the one he wanted to resolve his issues with, and still that person wouldn't talk to him. And then he really looked at himself deeply. And he said, on the one hand, he's saying to his friend, let's move on, let's resolve things, let's be friends again. But deep down, he said, I felt I was right and you were wrong. You know how we often say on the surface, let's get on, let's resolve things, let's be friends. But still deep down, I hold the position that I was right and you were wrong. And you know what? He said he really worked through that. He said he really did this deep work to remove that feeling. And the next time he rang his friend answered the phone. And sometimes I think when we do this deep work and we really take responsibility for my own actions, then we're really able to move forward and bring that sense of transformation. And I think that forgiveness, is a great part of the spiritual journey. So how do we begin to forgive? And I think the first step is really, really deeply wanting a life of peace and happiness. And how much do I really want to cancel all the conditions I'm holding in my head about your behavior and what has happened and free myself? When that resolve is really deep, I think I'm ready. I really have this courage to be able to begin this process of forgiveness. And I always feel that I first have to visit my spiritual truths, my spiritual practice. And that's always to really reconnect with the intrinsic self. And as you all know, I think the whole of Raja Yoga is this deep, deep journey to know, realize, and experience who I really am. Because I step back into my spiritual power. I take my power back. And when I take my power back, I have the inner strength to forgive and let go. And when I really think about the self, the way I've seen it for some time is that we have three personalities inside. And I would say two of these personalities find it very hard to forgive, very hard to let go, very hard to move on in life. One of them frees me, releases me, enables me to move forward. The first personality is my ego. And this is born out of my temporary identity of my body. My whole sense of self is based on the labels of my body. I see myself by my gender, my nationality, my family, my wealth, a whole lot of labels that give me a sense of self. And when my ego is ruling in my inner system, that's when I feel I compare with others and I sort of think I'm better, I know more, I am right. But when it comes into my feelings, that's when I feel so easily insulted, disrespected, not valued, excluded, sensitive. When I'm feeling these feelings, when my mind is feeling hurt, insulted, disrespected, no, I'm being deceived by my ego at that time. And when my ego is sovereign in my inner system, when my ego is dominating my perception of myself and my world, I find it very hard to forgive other people. My ego is vested in the past and what you did and what you said. And it's like my ego is the trap, is the prison that's holding me in the pain of the past. And so when my ego is ruling in my inner system, I cannot forgive others. I will hold on. And I think you would have heard stories too. I've met people till their dying day, they will not let go. We're so much attached to this false identity of who I am. And the pride, my ego, will not let me free myself from my past pain. The second personality that can't forgive is my lack of self-respect, which is a form of ego too. And this I takes its whole sense of identity from my body as well. I see myself as a temporary body. My sense of identity is all the labels. This I compares as well and thinks others are better, others know more, others don't love me, others don't respect me. When this I is ruling the inverted ego, the ego of inferiority, the ego of lack of self-respect, that's when I feel hopeless about myself, inadequate, inferior, unworthy. You know, all those uncomfortable feelings, depressed, I would say. And when this I rules my inner system, when I'm under the influence, and I feel this is the dominant personality in our world at the moment, that's when I cannot forgive myself. I cannot. When I think of my past, I feel so bad. I feel so guilty. I feel so ashamed. And yet really the spiritual journey is stepping out of that past, knowing that I was perhaps ignorant at that time. I did actions under the influence of my ego and lack of self-respect. And so this I was always thinking badly. I hold this deep belief about myself that I'm not a good person. I'm a bad person. And you'd be surprised how many people deep down have that attachment to this belief. Forgiveness is freeing myself from this belief about myself that I'm not good, that I'm not a lovable person, that I am inferior, all these deep beliefs. This is the deep work of spirituality, to break down these attachment, these ideas, these beliefs, these notions about myself. How? When I really start to practice the third eye. And so there's three I's: the eye of arrogance, the eye of superiority, can't forgive others; the eye of lack of self-respect, the eye of inferiority, can't forgive myself. And when I become the eternal soul, the one that always exists, this spark, this minute point, which sits right in the front of the brain, in the center of the forehead. When I not only know this, not only believe this, but when I start to experience my permanent self and how I sit in this temporary body, and how I begin to understand and experience that I always exist. I'm this permanent soul. And I come back to this sweet place in myself where I take all the pressure off myself to impress people, to look good. I start to deeply accept who I am. And this is the identity, because when I sit in my self-respect, I'm able to actually let go and move forward and forgive. But where do I get the power? Sometimes I think small things I can let go and forgive, but some big things have happened in our life, and they're just like that big shadow hanging over me. Other things are okay in my life, but this big shadow hangs over me. It's really my relationship with God. And as we go forward in this world, to me, there's nothing more precious than my connection with God. I feel we search for true love. We invest my heart in relationships. But there's only one relationship that's permanent, and that's this relationship with God. And when I start to really step onto the spiritual path. I start to experience the eternal self, the soul. But I look through the third eye and I see God, a soul like me. I'm a soul that's taken birth and rebirth. I reap the fruit of my actions. Sometimes my actions mean I can't forgive myself. Sometimes situations have meant I can't forgive others. But God is a soul that's eternally game of birth and rebirth, but a real living being. It's not about believing in God. It's not about having a concept of God. It's not about having an intellectual idea of God. It's about having a relationship with God, a living relationship with this soul. And when I begin to have this real living relationship, it fills me with this inner strength. And sometimes these days I feel that if we ask about meditation, a lot of us feel a meditation is just hard work. It's difficult because to meditate, I sort of have to elevate my consciousness, move myself into a higher state of being. It's not easy. But here, all we do is remember. And what does remembrance really mean? In fact, remembrance is the most natural thing which we do at every millisecond. At every moment of life, I'm remembering what I just did, what I have to do, what you said, what I said. It's the most natural aspect of our consciousness. And when I remember, three things happen. First, I connect. The instant I connect, I'm influenced with what I connect with. And thirdly, whatever influences me, I have a feeling inside. And so really, when I remember a relative, a family member, and I have a loving relationship, a good relationship, the instant I connect, I'm influenced by that good relationship. And I have the experience of feeling very relaxed and calm and light and happy. If I remember a family member I'm in conflict with, we're not getting on well, the instant you remember, you touch, you connect, you plug in, you are influenced by that conflict. And you'll feel disturbed, peaceless, uncomfortable inside. And the logic we have here is that if I remember a source that is constant in love, constant in peace, constant in power, constant in truth, what will happen to me? I am influenced by those qualities. And so what do I feel inside? And this is why what we learn on this spiritual journey is to live my life, fulfill my responsibilities to my family, fulfill my responsibilities in the workplace, but keep the connection with the divine. Remember God as I move about my life. And really, my own experience, if I practice to remember the divine, I keep the form of the divine in my mind, this radiant jewel of light. And when I connect, I'm influenced by that love and I feel loved and belonging. How your vibration in your mind is so high, you feel so good. And your vibration, this elevated vibration in your mind sustains you, sustains the atmosphere around you, sustains your family and friends. But if my mind is constantly going back to the past and what people have done and what people have said, it's a low vibration. I connect to all these negative incidents. And then I'm influenced by a low vibration and I have this low feeling in my mind. I feel down, I feel flat, I feel empty. If I am not happy, there's only one question I have to ask myself. What am I remembering? What have I plugged my mind into? Because when I dwell on something of the past or an anxiety of the future or a person's bad behavior, it's logical. I am not going to be happy. But when I remember who I am and I remember the divine, I plug in, I connect, I am influenced by truth. And really, instantly, you can calm down, cool down, and you can come back into that state. And when you remember God, you have so much strength to forgive. You start to see, I want to free myself. I want to be light. I want to be happy. Before I pass on, I want to clear all the story of my past and free myself. And I personally feel I once met a woman who was passed on her way. She was about to die. And I was talking with her, a very sweet lady. And for some reason, I asked her, and I don't know why it just came to me. I said, do you have any regrets? Is there anything that you would like to resolve or move forward on before you pass on? Instantly, a little tear just popped in her eye, just popped, just like that. And she said, there's a family member I haven't spoken to for 15 years. She won't speak to me. And I said to her, is that something you would like to resolve? She said, yes. And so she had the courage, she connected with that person, she met that person. And she said to me later, it wasn't perfect, but I was able to let so much go. And I feel rather than a lot of us get to that point in our life when there's not much time, then we start to think about a lot of the unfinished business of life and that I want to resolve it. I would suggest to do it now. Whatever is heavy in your heart, have the humility, and sometimes it needs incredible humility to free yourself from the jail of this self-imposed pain of memories and thoughts about others. It's possible to say, I didn't agree with what happened. It's not the way I would like, but I want to move forward. I'm freeing myself. My own experience is that when I feel loved deeply by God, so deeply, I feel I can let go anything. Does it really matter? Why am I holding on to it? What is it in me? It's just my old self is attached. It's actually my old ego that's attached. And actually, to free myself, to forgive others is such a great act, a huge step on the spiritual journey to a life of peace and happiness. So I'm going to stop at that point, and I'm just going to invite us all just for a few moments of meditation. And if I can request that wherever we're sitting, if we can put down devices, put down computers, and really just let's all resonate together and create a vibration wherever we sit in this world. Let's create this atmosphere. Let me sit quietly. And become aware of the eternal self. Just feel yourself sitting so lightly in the forehead. I, the one that always exists, sitting in my temporary costume. But now I choose to go beyond the consciousness of that which is temporary and experience my permanent self. I, the tiny spark of life energy, sitting in the front of the brain and the center of the forehead. In this state of self-awareness, Let me remember the lover of the soul, the one relationship that's permanent. Visualize a beautiful, radiant jewel emanating light. Just hold this image in the eye of your mind. Just remember and feel the influence of the purity of love, a quality of love that only God can give me. And feel this pure love, this divine love entering the core of your being. Just feel yourself being completely loved. And in this state of connection, this state of union, this state of belonging, I reflect on my past. And I see some memories that are holding me back from reaching my highest potential. And I choose to move on and let go. And this forgiveness frees me from my own self, frees me from my old story. If each morning I wake, I reconnect with my permanent self, and I naturally remember the lover of the soul, the one relationship that's permanent. I step back into my power. I have the power to let go, the power to forgive, the power to move on and free myself. Time is calling us to move forward, to free myself, and to forgive is one of the great acts. It helps me free myself from my past. And thank you, everyone.
Thank you, brother. Thank you for reminding us what all forgiveness can do and make us feel light and love ourselves again, most importantly. And also, what you said, that it is the greatest gift that we can give not only to others, but to ourselves too. And we can also remember what you said about remembrance is very beautiful, that remembrance helps you to connect and then influences you and also generates feelings. So sometimes when we feel down, we can go backwards and check that what is it that is influencing me and what is it that I'm remembering. So that is a good way to check. We have a few comments and a few questions that I shall read them out to you. Why is it that it is mostly easy to forgive or let go for bigger things than trivial things?
Yes, I think it's a part of human nature, isn't it? That we allow ourselves to get so irritated by repetitive small behaviors. And yet sometimes we focus, I think it's because we give time to the bigger things. We realize that they're a big block, a big problem. We give time to them to properly let them go. But we don't really give time to those small irritations and frustrations and understand what is a method, what is a way I can do it. But I think we really have to give time to those too, because I think we all live with people who have habits and behaviors that sometimes, they're not my way that I would like to do things, but it's something I have to accept. And to me, I think I've seen a huge method for feeling peaceful is accepting people, allowing them to be who they are, and allowing myself or teaching myself to, I suppose, become more of a detached observer of others rather than influence. And, the way I'm seeing the spiritual journey these days is that the more I become pure, it means the less I'm influenced by people, opinions, attitudes, behaviors, expressions, words. Really, today, most people carry so much stuff in their heart about others and how they've been treated. And really, it's hard to enjoy life when I'm like that. And I think that when I learn to accept myself, I can accept others. If I can't really accept me, I find it hard to really accept others as they are. And to me, true love is really allowing people to be who they are. If my love has a lot of control that you have to behave in the ways I like, you have to speak in the ways I like, if you have to do things in the way I like, that's not love. That's control and manipulation. And I think that you have to learn to really be very, very accepting of other people. And that means that I can forgive them for those small things too.
Thank you, brother. We have the next question is, I still can't forgive my brother for our argument we have a few years ago. I blame him for his arrogance or ego. I don't like the arrogance in him. He asked me for forgiveness, but I still put the blame on him. Does it mean that I actually have some ego or arrogance and I just see my reflection of myself in him? What is your thought?
Oh. I think so, to be really honest. He's asked for forgiveness and you're not giving it because it's my ego that holds on to all these things. My ego won't let go of the past. And so he's asking forgiveness for his behavior. And I think you should accept that. And in a way, you free yourself too. He may have been arrogant at that time, but if I don't let the memory go, that's my ego. And really, I think, it's my ego that holds on to insults. It's my ego that holds on to disrespect. When I become self-conscious and humble, I don't accept insults. they don't affect me when it's really my ego that holds on to all this sort of stuff. And really, freedom is freeing myself from my own ego. And it's my ego that I think there's a deep relationship between ego and love. The more ego I have, the less lovable I am. The less I will enjoy really loving relationships in life. It's why we love little children and so on, because they have less ego. And they evoke, even old people, sometimes really old people, they've also moved beyond their ego to a certain extent. And so it attracts our love. The more I become a soul, naturally I shed the ego of the temporary self, and I will attract love in my life. And so the role of ego makes you feel separate. Ego will always tell you you don't belong, people are like this. It makes you feel separate in your mind. And I think a lot of the spiritual journey is dissolving my ego. My ego is completely deceiving me. It's my ego that whispers all these wrong things in my ear. So personally, I would accept his apologies and even be humble enough to apologize that it took you a while to accept. I think that's greatness. You know, sometimes we think it's weakness to apologize. Actually, it's greatness spiritually. Humility is the greatness of the human spirit.
Thank you. Our next question is, how do you forgive or ask for forgiveness from somebody who is no longer with you?
Yeah, I think that's just something we have to do with incredible honesty in my heart. That if someone has passed on, and in a way, it's more like forgiving myself for perhaps things which, I've done to them. And really, it's an act of love because we know the soul's eternal. The soul is living somewhere in another body. And if I do that with a true heart, that feeling will reach that soul. Maybe not consciously, but unconsciously, that feeling will reach that soul. And I would absolutely, make the effort to be close to God, feel that love from God, and genuinely forgive yourself if there's some things you've done to that individual. Apologize in your mind. Put a full stop. Don't keep revisiting it. Let it go and move forward. It's so important that we don't keep revisiting all the stories of the past because they're like the shadow that really holds me back from really enjoying the present and stepping into my future.
There is a comment that when I keep forgiving, the other person continues to believe that they have been right and that it is me who wronged them. Do you have anything you would like to add to that?
Yes. Sometimes some people are there, are like that. And I think that still I should act according to my truth, even if they are sort of feeling, well, yes, you should have known better and so on. Some people are like that. To be frank, ego means I have no self-awareness. Ego means I think you're the problem, I'm fine. And unfortunately, there's some people who have zero self-awareness. But in the long-term scheme of things, I have to live with myself. And that's why when I always act by my truth, even if someone behaves badly or I behave badly, it's still I ask for forgiveness for my part. If they don't ask for forgiveness for their part, that's their story. That's their karmic story, so to speak. But I always feel that I have to live according to my truth. I have to behave according to my values. And so I'm not the loser. That person may feel I'm the loser, but I'm actually living according to my truth and my values and my principles. And so I'm a winner in the long term.
Our next question is, what is the sign that we have really forgiven someone?
I will feel light, and I will feel love entering again for that individual. Because where there's, I can't forgive, love is completely blocked. I can only see what's wrong, what's bad. When I've really forgiven and let go, I feel free, I feel light, and I will be able to have loving feelings for that individual. I'll be able to generate some warmth in the relationship with that individual. And it takes a lot of courage to do that and a lot of humility. Because as I've been saying, my ego will keep holding on. It will keep justifying my position. And yet I suffer as a result of that. All of this forgiveness is freeing myself from my own suffering, my own unhappiness.
Our last question, is there any real difference between letting go, repression, detachment, and forgiveness?
Well, I think they all have a good friendship. And I would say that, all of them have their own value in life, but I feel in this time we need to be detached. Detachment is a great wisdom, a huge wisdom. And a lot of us, we misunderstand detachment. So we feel detachment means aloof, to be cut off, to be unfriendly, to be cold. But actually, to be truly loving, I have to be detached. Because when you're detached, you can love people when they behave badly. You can love people when they behave well. You can love them constantly. But when you're attached, you're influenced by them, you're affected by them. One day you love them, the next day you're upset by them. And I think that, the highest point on the spiritual journey is to live in this world, be fully responsible, fully engaged, be very loving, caring, but uninfluenced. That is spirituality. That is purity. That is detachment. And in a way, when you're in that state, yes, you're forgiving. You're all of those things that you mentioned. You have that power. Detachment is actually our natural state. But as we lost our power, we became dependent on everything around us. And that's what's made us really weak. And why we sometimes want to grow strong. We want to improve. We want to raise our consciousness, but I just don't feel the strength. It's dependence, attachment that makes me feel weak.
Thank you once again,
So
brother. I think we need a class on detachment next, probably, because that's another vast topic on its own.
yes, that's such a huge topic.
Yeah.
Slightly controversial topic, Javine, but it's a great topic. And I think the most misunderstood of all virtues, I would say. So yes, maybe we can do that sometime.
Thank you once again for your time and sharing with us today. We have souls from all across the globe who have sent their gratitude and also their regards. We have on YouTube from Bali, from Jakarta, from Trinidad, from UK, and also on Zoom from all over the world, telling you thank you very much for joining us. And thank you everyone for logging in. Our next session will be on May 15th at 4 p.m. Jakarta. I have dropped my number in the chat box. So do feel free to drop me a message so that I can update you with the upcoming programs. Until then, let's try and take whatever Brother Charlie has shared with us today and start practicing forgiveness. Stay safe and stay blessed. Have a nice weekend. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Jabine. Thank you, everybody. It's really lovely to be with you. And I should thank you, Jabine, for hosting these for nearly, 15 15, 18 months is fantastic. I think I know how much everyone appreciates it. Thank you.
Thank you, brother. Om Shanti.